Hello, my name is David Doe. I'm the VP of Talent Strategy and Excellence for Shell, and I'm here today to talk to you about crafting a people strategy. But before I get going, I've got a very important slide to share with you. I'm sure you're going to read and inwardly digest this, but essentially, please don't buy or sell shares on the basis of what I'm about to say today. So what am I going to cover today? I have an agenda, and in that agenda, I'm going to cover what is a people strategy, why would you want one, where's the value, give you some insights into Shell's approach, and hopefully give you some hints and tips that you might take away and apply in your own context. And the brief has been given, please be concise with no fluff. So let's see if I deliver on that. So what's the difference between a people strategy and an employee value proposition? Because I think sometimes these things can get confused. I'm going to start with what an employee value proposition is. It's the mutually beneficial handshake between the employer and the employee. Whereas the people strategy is around how you arrange your whole system and approach to unlock human performance in support of your business strategy. And I would argue that successfully executing a people strategy, which is intrinsically linked to your firm's business strategy, delivering both engaged people and commercial success, is where HR's value should be judged. So now that we've established what a people strategy is, why would you want one? Now I'm going to start with a confession. Up until about 2019, actually Shell did not have a comprehensive or explicit people strategy. That's not to say that we didn't make strategic people choices from time to time. We absolutely did, around leadership potential identification, around diversity and inclusion, around how we did resourcing. But the point was, emergent strategy was the norm. But then we decided to change our approach. And the two reasons for that was the adoption of greater clarity in relation to our purpose and business strategy and the scale of the challenge posed in front of us. And so what did we consider? Two elements. Firstly, what are the people implications associated with our business strategy? And secondly, what are the underlying environment in the macro environment? So what do we think about the energy transition? Fundamentally, we believe that the energy transition will transform business models and skills more than in the next 10 years than it has in the last 50. And the macro environment to work is changing. What people want and expect from their employers is changing. We need to adapt to that. So that's a little bit of context around why you might want a people strategy. Now, let's give you some insights into what our business strategy looks like. So here it is. It's called Powering Progress. Now, Shell's purpose is to power progress together with more and cleaner energy solutions. We believe that rising standards of living for a growing global population are likely to continue to drive demand for energy for years to come. And at the same time, the need to tackle climate change means there is a global transition underway to a low carbon energy system. And we believe Shell can and must play a role as the world accelerates to a future of cleaner energy. And access to energy is essential for factors like economic growth, access to education, enabling healthcare. And that's why Shell is changing to be a more focused and more resilient and more competitive energy company, not just for the energy system of today, but for the energy system of tomorrow. And Powering Progress sets out our strategy to accelerate that transition of our business to net zero emissions in step with society. It's designed to deliver value for our shareholders, for our customers, and for wider society. Powering Progress generates value for our shareholders. It provides the financial strength to transform our company as the world makes the transition to cleaner energy. It focuses on working with our customers across sectors to accelerate the transition to net zero emissions in step with society. A net zero world is where society stops adding to the total amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Powering Progress also means powering lives and livelihoods through our products, activities, and by supporting an inclusive society. And we aspire to be one of the world's most diverse and inclusive energy companies. And finally, it means respecting nature by protecting the environment, reducing waste, and making a positive contribution to biodiversity. So with that in mind, what's our people strategy? Our people strategy will deliver Powering Progress. Its 5 themes are a set of choices by which all of our business can win in a world of continuing change. It provides the frame and options to differentiate across our different businesses. Mindsets and behaviours reflect who we are, what binds us together, and how we address the challenges of the future. A changing world requires leadership that can navigate the energy transition, deliver integrated value, and lead through change. And investing in and developing diverse talent, empowering our businesses to deliver competitive performance, and building new skills and capabilities will be key to making the transition to net zero purposefully and profitably. But you're probably looking at this and thinking, this isn't much different to what I'd see in many other companies. And that's true, because the real value of any strategy doesn't lie in an intellectual model, but in the execution. None of these themes are new or necessarily unique to Shell. However, the philosophy, the framework, the approach, how we've interwoven it and how we're going about execution will be the key differentiators. So let me start with our first theme, our mindsets and behaviours. Now, successful culture change defines who you are, where you've been, what binds you together, and where you're going. And centre all of our efforts is this, our mindsets and behaviours. Now, two of these themes, grow trust in us and engage and inspire, speak to bits of our culture which resonate strongly internally. The other three themes are focused on where we would like to go. Learn a mindset, the recognition that as we move through the energy transition, there isn't a way to waterfall to the solution. We'll have to learn and adapt as we go. Maximize our performance. We realize that in the end, time is not on our side, and therefore we absolutely need to maximize our performance to generate those returns that are needed for the investment in our transition businesses. And then finally, grow trust in us, which is fundamentally about, as we move from an asset and supply-led organization to a more of a customer and demand-driven organization, the ability to think back from the customer, to move from inside out to outside in thinking, becomes increasingly important. And you'll see these mindsets and behaviors interwoven through everything we're doing in the pursuit of unlocking human performance. Let's go on to the next thing. Now, all things being equal, better leaders deliver better results. We believe leaders play a key role in shaping our culture through role modeling. And our aspiration is to have top quartile leadership, because the contribution of a leader is beyond their own output. It includes the collective output of everyone they lead, influence, and partner with. And you'll see at the heart of this, we've put our mindsets and behaviors, and we've called out learner mindset because of its prominence. At the bottom right-hand side, skills refer to the more granular, generic, and foundational skills a leader requires when they first become leaders, when they manage managers, and when they lead communities. On the bottom left are experiences, and they're an integral part of leadership. They accelerate development by exposing leaders to a range of successful and dissonant experiences, including early exposure to team leadership or informal leadership. And leadership experiences strengthen our leadership pipeline by testing leaders' character and judgment and surfacing derailers. There's no such thing as a perfect organizational model, particularly in today's context. And in our organization, value is made at the interface. So it's important that we move people around the organization so they understand the value and the trade-offs as we come to make judgments at different points. Okay, that's leadership. Let's move on to talent. Now, talent has three aims. Firstly, we want to remain an employer of choice, appealing to a broader range of profiles in an increasingly competitive market where our industry is declining in attractiveness. Secondly, we want to be able to identify, grow, and deploy a healthy, diverse, and inclusive leadership cadre to deliver integrated value across the Shell Group now and in the future. And third, we'd like to have a competitive workforce and offer meaningful careers whilst addressing changing business models, the dropping half-life of skills, and the future of work. And delivering on these objectives requires action on 6 fronts, as you can see in the wheel. In resourcing, we're repositioning our employer brand, renewing our graduate programme, and introducing more agile resourcing methods. On leadership identification, selection, and deployment, we're updating how we identify leaders, reflecting the changes required by our mindsets and behaviours. In DE&I, we've introduced self-identification in 12 countries, and we're now focusing on 4 themes in addition to gender and nationality. They are race and ethnicity, enablement, gender identification, and sexual orientation. On total workforce management, we're now transparently tracking and continually planning our total human asset costs. That's shell, contingent, and travel. On upskilling and reskilling, we recognise that in the context of the dropping half-life of skills and a changing portfolio, it's harder to meaningfully talk about job security and career longevity. So our aim is to place employability at the heart of our value proposition. And finally, in relation to future of work, we're seeking to address the talent, employee relations, industrial relations, D&I, and reputational implication of how work gets done, where it gets done, and who performs it, in the context of a changing work environment, employee expectations, and rising ESG interest in just transition. Now, skills and capabilities. Our aim is to accelerate powering progress by learning and adapting faster than the competition. We want to ensure that over the coming years, our total workforce is one of our competitive differentiators, and that Shell is recognised both internally and externally as a high impact, efficient learning organisation. And this means safeguarding our licence to operate by delivering more high impact, efficient learning programmes on safety and compliance with quicker seat times and full target audience. It means adapting to the dropping half-life of skills by quickly targeting training at identified skill gaps in the flow of work. It means identifying those capabilities which are critical to differentiating our business and delivering powering progress and supporting these through things like academies. It means placing learning and employability at the heart of both our societal licence and our employee value proposition. And finally, it means transforming our culture to be one of learning. Now, I mentioned human performance at the beginning of all of this. And indeed, this is where it all comes together. Delivering powering progress requires a fundamental shift towards an agile, value-orientated, and outcome-focused organisation. Simplifying the way we operate will enable delivery of commercial, competitive business performance. We want to be more agile. We want to be able to adapt to changing circumstances and make improvement centred to our approach. So we're creating common language about how we talk about our business and also empowering the organisation to differentiate in places to unlock value. So I've given you some insights. I'm going to deliver on the last of my promises, which was some tips. So the first of these is to build on the strengths of your heritage. Provide clarity on what binds you, makes you who you are, and where you're going. Successful cultural change recognises where you've come from, what makes you who you are, as well as the transitions you need to be successful in the future. And in doing that, recognise that culture is the output of all the things that happen in your organisation, and image is how you are perceived. So work on the bit in the middle, how you influence both. The second, in an organisation as large as Shell and many other organisations, a one-size-fits-all approach just won't cut it, and it won't unlock human performance. So tailor to unlock integrated value. Choose and sequence what you want to deploy in each business, including which elements you want to dial up or dial down. Differentiate to unlock business unit performance, but not at the expense of the integrated value. Third thing, focus on execution. The value of any strategy isn't in an intellectual model. In some respects, there's nothing new under the sun, but the value is in the execution. Define the minimum standards, use the frameworks and solutions you've got in place, be persistent with minimal changes to language. Next, make sure you don't attempt to market the engineering of the solution. It'll be complex. Focus on the key messages you want to convey to your organisation. Make sure that you are simple. Use simple, persistent use of language. Don't add new concepts. And finally, be ready for all future scenarios. No strategy survives first action with the enemy. Be ready to pivot and update. And here, I want to leave you with a thought. Much of what has happened over the last 2 years, the world has changed quite significantly, but a lot of those themes were evident pre-pandemic. And actually, many of the things that are now being attributed to the pandemic were attributed to other things beforehand. A good example, virtualization of work, which was attributed, and flexible working was attributed to the multi-generational workforce before the pandemic and is now being predominantly attributed to the pandemic at this juncture. Now, recognize that it's really important to identify the underlying cause. For example, a multi-generational based workforce and differences based on that, there is simply no evidence for it. Most studies don't look across cohort, they don't look across geography, and they don't look across period. And those that do actually find there are really no differences. And what's good for one generation is good for us all. And so be really clear what the underlying drivers are and make sure that you are pivoting and addressing those things rather than necessarily responding to the latest zeitgeist. And that is where I will finish. Thank you very much. Okay, so the first question I've got, you rightly stated it's all about execution. How do you ensure that execution is happening at all levels of the organization with the same high quality? And I think, this is partly about developing a set of standard solutions across your COE with a frame and options within the businesses. This isn't about ensuring that different businesses identify lots of different solutions. It's about having a standardized set of and a high quality set of COEs that are really intimate to the business, that recognize the need to flex, and then driving seamless experience through your employee operations, your HR operations, as we would call it, and also hardwiring all of those choices through digitalization, which allows you to scale. So that will be my answer to that one. When selecting leaders, how do you identify these mindsets and abilities in your recruits? Well, what we've done for a very long time, and we've had leadership potential since the 1960s, is focus on three attributes: capacity, which is all about thinking; achievement, which is about doing and also about learning; and relationships, which is about people and how you get on with people. Now, if you think back to our mindsets and behaviors, some of those things are about how you think, some of those things about what you do, performance, and obviously learning, and some of those things are about relationships. Now, what we certainly noticed, and we've assessed leadership since the 1960s, and we've had really good data going back over a long period of time, was some of our leadership models were, whilst we'd said were evenly weighted around capacity, achievement, and relationships, when it came out to it, individuals were basically placing more weight on capacity, about the thinking, than necessarily about the doing and the relationships. And we've sought to even that up. We've taken a bunch of people out of scope. We actually moved a lot of our workforce out of scope of leadership potential identification, because early on in a career, it's far easier to identify intellect and personality. And by the way, those things don't really change, but the things that do change over your career are things like drive and your relational skills. So we focus later on, we've introduced new tooling, which introduces multiple assessors, and we have real rigor in how we go about this, and then we constantly assess. And we are transparent on that assessment with our staff. So that would be my answer to that one. Last question. What's the best methodology to engrave organizational culture into its people? As I mentioned before, so I don't think there is a silver bullet out there, but I do think that people that go after culture change need to recognize that culture is an output. And image is how others perceive you. So you really need to think through what you can do. And the best description I've seen of this is culture, identity, and image. And it's really how you go about your identity, how you want people to think about the organization. Set an aspiration out there and think about how you hardwire it through all aspects of your HR model, a holistic people strategy to deliver on that objective. And make sure that identity is related to delivering your business strategy. That's my final answer. Thank you very much for your time.